Thank you for attending tonight. My name is Joe Turner, and I have the honor to serve as the Director of the Parks and Recreation Department for the City of Houston. This is the fourth public meeting of this series of the master planning process for Memorial Park. And I'd just like to review those real quickly with you as we move to where we are today. The previous meetings, September 17th, it was the story of the park, People in Nature, which was the initial design and concepts. November 10th was organizing the site, what goes where. January 12th was spaces and places, how will it look? And tonight, the Memorial Park tomorrow, a place for all Houstonians. Tonight's meeting is an opportunity to share the proposed plan and answer questions about the plan before it's presented to City Council for adoption. There will be a final presentation of the plan at Quality of Life on March 25th of this month. The Quality of Life Committee is chaired by Councilmember Ellen Cohen, and the meeting will begin at 2 p.m. at City Hall. This is a visionary plan for the next century for the park, and like Herman Park's master plan from 1995, this one for Memorial Park may take us 20 years or even longer to complete. So let's get moving with the introduction so we can see the plan. I'd like to recognize Gary Tetreault, the Director of Museum of Fine Arts Houston, for generously allowing the Brown Auditorium for the meeting tonight. I'd like to now quickly introduce the planning team. Shelley Arner, Executive Director of Memorial Park Conservancy. Sarah Newberry, Project Manager, Memorial Park, Uptown Houston. I have with me from our team, Jay Daniels, the Park Manager, Memorial Park. And then we have Thomas Waltz, who we'll hear here from in a minute, who's the Principal of Nelson Bird Waltz Landscape and Architects. Hey, hey. And his team, Jeff Atten, Senior Associate, is right here. And then Samantha Dabney, Designer, right there. And then at this point, I'd also like to recognize Priya Sarkar of Lord Cultural Resources. She will be our meeting facilitator. And now, our host of tonight's event is Councilmember Ellen Cohen of Houston City Council District C. Would you please welcome the council member? All right.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the Hood, which also includes Memorial Park. So I do want to thank you all for joining us this evening. There was some question earlier this morning about should this be canceled or not because of the rain and all, and I said, come on, Houstonians are really tough, and you've proved it. So thank you for being here. Thank you also to other public officials who are here tonight, and to my colleagues in City Council, several of whom are supposed to be here, and when they do, we'll have a chance to introduce them. Tonight we'll hear about the proposal for the future of Memorial Park. And while I'm extremely lucky to have Memorial Park in District C, Memorial Park is a people's park. It's a citywide park for everyone. In fact, Memorial Park has received visits from people representing over 130 zip codes. This is the last in a series of 8 public meetings about the park's future. The next step will be, as Joe mentioned, for a meeting of the Quality of Life Committee, which I do chair, and that'll take place March 25th at 2 p.m., and you are more than welcome, encouraged. We'd love to have as many of you who would like to be there to come, have a chance to speak. A team that consists of the Houston Parks and Recreation Department, the Memorial Park Conservancy, and Uptown Houston have been jointly leading the long-range master plan process for the park. What you'll see tonight is a culmination of a year and a half of research, of public input, of input from over 70 local technical experts, and design work led by Nelson Bird Waltz. This is the proposed master plan for Memorial Park, a plan that will improve the park starting soon and provide a better park for generations of Houstonians to come. And what do I mean by better? Here are a few examples. Better means a more resilient ecology, one that takes into consideration what plants and trees are native to the area and can best thrive there. What animals can thrive best in a healthy park ecology? And what can withstand natural disturbances like hurricanes and droughts so that the park and we don't have to live through the sad loss of thousands of trees again. Better means improved amenities for users, better ball fields, better trails for cyclists, better trails for runners, for walkers, strollers, and dog walkers, to name a few. Better means greater safety, connectivity, and access. Access to parts of the park that currently are inaccessible to most of us, and safer crossings. And better means more effectively observing and telling the story of this human history of the park, such as Camp Logan. Better means improved infrastructure that will support restrooms and water fountains, for example. And better means, finally, the capture and use of millions of gallons of storm water for irrigation and firefighting. Those are only a few examples. Nelson Bird Waltz will share with you many more examples of the improved park. So tonight, we update you to continue to answer your questions. And tonight, we seek to share our enthusiasm for what will surely be the crown jewel of this country's city parks. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. We are so excited to see all of you here tonight. I just want to echo my colleagues' thanks to you for coming out in the rain and being here tonight to share in the culmination of this year and a half of work that we've all been collaborating on. You are among 3,000 Houstonians who have been part of this journey over the last year and a half, and so we're just thrilled that you all are here for this evening. I do want to let you know that what the evening holds for us. Essentially, the Nelson Bird Waltz team is going to present the proposed master plan along with additional research that they have been doing and want to share with you. Then I'm going to invite the planning team up to the front. We're going to do a Q&A. Hopefully you all received or picked up index cards on your way in. And if you don't have index cards, perhaps just wave your hand in the air and we can also have members of our team bring more down to you. And we would encourage you to please write down your questions that you have about the presentation on the cards. Suzanne here with Memorial Park Conservancy will be coming around with this basket periodically throughout the presentation to pick up your questions. And then we will do the Q&A following the presentation. And then we'll conclude with just reviewing the next steps again that Joe mentioned earlier. So we're excited to get started. One of the things I do want to also let you know is that tonight's presentation is being videoed. For folks who were not able to come tonight, we are making this presentation and the previous presentations available. Those are available on memorialparktomorrow.org. And throughout the evening, we will be doing brief Spanish translations. My colleague Odile Cuandro-Neuberg is going to be coming up to translate short portions of the presentation, and then that way folks who are part of the Houston community who are Spanish speakers will also be able to share in this evening's event. So with that, I will turn it over to Odile.
Thank you. Muchas gracias. Buenas noches y bienvenidos. Agradecemos su compañía esta noche. También quisiera agradecer la presencia de las siguientes personas. Nuestro anfitrión, el señor Joe Turner, director de Parques y Recreaciones. Gracias al Museo de Bellas Artes de la ciudad de Houston por permitirnos el uso del Auditorio Brown. Muchas gracias. Tenemos el honor de contar con la asistencia de la concejala Ellen Cohen del Distrito C. la cual les expresa su sincero agradecimiento por su asistencia y les comunica que el parque es un recurso de todo el pueblo y por eso la importancia de hacerle saber a todo el público lo que está pasando. Nos dijo que a través de un nuevo plan maestro general, el Memorial Park, tesoro de nuestra ciudad, será restaurado, conservado y mejorado para poder ser disfrutado por todos los habitantes de la ciudad de Houston en los años venideros. Agradecemos también la presencia de los miembros del consejo del municipio que nos hacen el favor de acompañarnos esta noche. También me complace presentarles los miembros de nuestro panel, Shelley Arnold, representante de la organización benéfica llamada Memorial Park Conservancy. También contamos con la presencia de la representante de Houston Tears, Sarah Newberry. Conduciendo el evento tenemos a Priya Sirkar de la compañía Lord Cultural Resources. Durante el transcurso de esta noche traduciré al español algunas de las presentaciones en forma resumida. Les pido que tomen nota de cualquier duda que tengan y la apunten en las tarjetas que les proporcionaremos. Al final de la noche recogeremos todas las tarjetas con sus preguntas y trataremos de contestarlas de la mejor manera posible. No habrá necesidad de levantar la mano. Por último, me complazco en presentarles al arquitecto Tomás Waltz, director de la prestigiada firma de arquitectos paisajistas Nelson Bird Waltz, que nos hablará acerca del plan maestro y nos pondrá al corriente de lo que hasta ahora se ha hecho. Él se encuentra acompañado por algunos miembros de su equipo, tales como Jeff Ayton y Samantha Dabney. Contamos también esta noche con la presencia del ingeniero Bree Sarté, representante de la compañía Sherwood, encargado del estudio del tratamiento del agua. En estos momentos le cedo la palabra al arquitecto Tomás. Muchas gracias.
Good evening, everyone. It is an honor and a privilege to return tonight to present to you the final draft of the master plan for Memorial Park. It has been an extraordinary journey and one that our team is so thrilled to share with not only this room, but with all the citizens of Houston. We really do believe this is the park that belongs to the entire city, as Councilmember Cohen mentioned. It is central, it's radiant, and it's a powerful place on the earth. Wendell Berry said, "You don't know who you are until you know where you are." And that simple phrase has guided a lot of our process through this park. What is Memorial Park? Why is it Memorial Park? What has it meant to so many people, so many ecologies, so many complex systems? Memorial Park has been an important place in the world for a very, very long time. And will it be a better place because our generation cared for it? My hope is the answer to that is yes, a resounding yes. We are all united in this room around one thing. We are all here because we care about Memorial Park. We may care in different ways. We may not agree completely with each other, but we're in this room because we love this place on earth. And I can guarantee you the deepest motivation of our large team, including 70 Houstonians, has been to deliver to you the most responsible answer to the very complex problem of what is the best and most resilient future for this park. This is a slide many of you have seen before if you've been coming to these meetings. If you have not, it's important that I run through this again as a kind of recap of our process. That red dashed line has been moving slowly for a year and a half to the right. It's now made its way right here to March, and what you're seeing on the lower part is a key of images that key you into where we are in the process from when we began in September of 2013 with looking at the larger scale ecologies of the state, What is the state made of? How does it function? What are the plant and animal communities? What was this land 10,000 years ago? Looking for clues. This is really an essay of clues moving forward. We then began studying the site, spending lots of time in the park, inviting our team Berg Oliver to do conservation biodiversity surveys for wildlife and plant communities. The public meetings were happening all the way across this line until April of last year. We summarized it in the programming and public input, and then in June, we began the design of the master plan, which has, what you're seeing are sort of initial sketch ideas that get more and more refined until you get to a rendering of the final plan. Tonight, I'm pleased to bring you the renderings that we will present to Quality of Life on the 25th, and it will then come up for City Council vote the following week. This process began with our 3 clients, Uptown Houston, Houston Parks and Recreation Department, and the Memorial Park Conservancy. That, coupled with the public input and the research of our very large team, who dug into things like signage, archaeology, history, cultural resources, ecological resources, lighting, operations and maintenance, cost estimating. It's irresponsible to deliver a park without understanding what its ongoing maintenance will be. So we've tried to be very thorough. Even though this is a master plan, this is a good point to mention that a master plan is a guiding document. It's sort of like a roadmap. You don't know what your vacation will actually lead to as far as the meals you'll eat or the things you might see, but you have that roadmap that will get you to the right place. The opportunity that master planning affords one is to look comprehensively at things like large-scale connectivity within the other parks of the city. We can look at transportation. How is this project fitting into the larger scale ambitions of public transit within the city of Houston? How is it fitting into a regional ecology or even a global ecology? We've looked at the flyways from Central America to Canada and the role that Houston, and in particular Memorial Park, plays in this. We've looked at stormwater management thanks to Bree Sarte from Sherwood Design Engineering, who's going to speak later on tonight. This is our chance to look comprehensively to build the best and most resilient bones of this park moving forward, so that when we engage in restoration ecology, when we engage in replanting forests, establishing savanna, that we're getting it right. It's with the right bones, the right infrastructure. We have an opportunity that we are in a generation who is helping heal parks, as opposed to many years in the past where so many parks across America were the receiving grounds of interstates, highways, stadia, giant infrastructure that got dumped in parks because parks were seen as empty. And I can guarantee you through our research, we have discovered that Memorial Park is very, very full. It's full of life, it's full of history, and it's full of tremendous opportunity for Houston. This work led to the guiding principles through an engagement process where we have, we were at 2,950, and this room has a capacity of 300, I believe. So now we're well above 3,000 Houstonians who have engaged with us personally on this process. This is a map that was an exercise done over the course of a couple of weeks, asking 700 and almost 800 runners using Memorial Park what their zip code was. And we had a remarkable 134 different zip codes represented in this brief survey that Councilmember Cohen referred to earlier. It's absolutely extraordinary proof of how this park serves the entire region. The public process resulted in these guiding principles, which have evolved over time. Reconnect the land, waterways, trails, people, and memories. We found early on that many people didn't even know why it was called Memorial Park, and the idea of this park as a memorial to the soldiers who lost their lives in World War I was something that many people weren't even aware of. To consolidate compatible uses together in appropriate areas. This is, again, a responsible act of shared maintenance, of shared parking, shared concessions, all of those kinds of things. So we're grouping like with like. To restore the ecology of the park and our connection to it. to enhance the overall park experience and its amenities, to tend the land and our cultural history. This is an important point because the landscape is a powerful living organism. You know, we shape it, we have to manage and tend it for it to continue to serve in the ways that we hope. But also our cultural traces are lost if we don't maintain and sustain those as well. Some of the results of the early studies were this map, which was really one of the things I think that struck our entire team early on, was that the park was a place divided. It was divided by many, many roads that bisected large tracts of land, that we found entire zones of the park that were subdivided by heavily trafficked roads, like this area. How could we start to reduce that footprint, reduce the asphalt in these areas, start to rebuild the more fragile ecologies of the southern part of the park? That resulted in an idea of stitching and bridging. How can we, without land acquisition, make the park bigger? By connecting the southern and northern halves, by moving the roads to reunite large tracts of land. We also confronted a lot of resistance to the fact that people who believed this was a pristine wilderness. In some cases, folks thought it was the last remnant of a pristine Texas forest ecology, which through our research we found the number of times it had been cleared is absolutely phenomenal. From the Reinerman Tract, the orchards, the agricultural production, the logging practices that were rampant throughout this piece of land, all the way to Camp Logan. And the light pink you're seeing are the areas most impacted by construction over the past century. We then summarized those areas that had been most altered and said, let's focus any new development and new construction on these areas so that the areas least impacted can be restored back to a sustainable habitat. This is a very simple diagram of an analysis of the impervious surface of picnic area, the gravel and pavement, the ball fields to the south, ball fields isolated to the northwest, separate fields here, the pretty much contiguous forest, the Arboretum and Nature Center, and this little piece of land to the west that many people don't even realize is part of Memorial Park, as well as the Weiss Tract here to the northwest. What we sought to do was the following. Take the purple, I'll go back one, take the purple of the picnic loop and distribute it throughout the park in smaller picnic areas. Honor some of the historical resources and traces that we discovered with with Susan Turner and Associates and the archaeologists who helped us out. Discovering some of the remnants of Camp Logan are actually still in the park. Uniting all of the athletic fields all the way across the northern area to share in maintenance, irrigation, parking, lighting, and concessions. The next big initiative was to restore the ecologies of the park. First, we had to decide what those were, and this came through a careful look at hydrology, at soil science, and seed banks, understanding what are the native plants that belong to each of these different areas. You know, all of Houston is a delta. It's a deltaic plain of highly erodible sandy soils over a layer of clay. So these soils support very specific ecologies. So we started to understand that there is a logical difference. The southern part of the park suffered much less in the drought, and that's because these are more saturated, low, protected soils of the riparian or river forest. This is pine hardwood forest in the next color, the pine savanna, and then native prairie in this area. So the soils are really telling us what ecology can best be supported here. Jeff Ayton will go in detail into those different typologies. So this is it's a very different kind of map for most Houstonians to look at Memorial Park with all the roads erased and the fields and just start to see what is the earth, what is the ground telling us is the ecology of this place. So Jeff is going to walk us through some details of that ecological restoration, and then after Odile does a quick summary. I'll be back after the restoration piece.
Okay. Ok. El arquitecto Tomás nos habló de la importancia del Memorial Park en nuestra comunidad y también nos habló de la cronología del plan maestro. Los acontecimientos que hasta el día de hoy se han realizado son los siguientes: entrevistas entre TIERS, Memorial Park Conservancy y el Departamento de Parques y Recreaciones. El proceso de aportación del público e investigaciones científicas conducidas por geólogos y biólogos locales. También nos habló de la aportación pública y la importancia de escuchar las necesidades del pueblo. Se condujo una encuesta en la cual se le preguntó al azar a 774 usuarios del parque de qué sector de la ciudad provenían, y se descubrió que provenían de más de 134 códigos postales diferentes, lo cual nos indica claramente que el parque es utilizado y disfrutado por una gran mayoría de nuestros ciudadanos y no tan solo por los vecinos adjuntos. Se habló también de una guía de principios. La guía de principios para dicho proyecto fue formulada por el equipo de Nelson Burr Walsh para incorporar y resumir el proceso de aportación y participación del público y del equipo de expertos técnicos. Los siguientes principios han guiado al equipo de arquitectos en el transcurso de este diseño. Primero, reconectar las áreas, los canales y los senderos. Reconectar también a la gente y sus recuerdos. Consolidar usos de instalaciones compatibles en áreas apropiadas. Restaurar el parque ecológicamente y educar a la gente acerca del parque. Mejorar la experiencia del parque y sus instalaciones en general. Cuidar de la tierra y de nuestro historial cultural. Por medio de cuidados, mantener el balance del medio ambiente. El arquitecto Walsh nos habló acerca de cómo el parque fue dividido a través de los años y de un plan maestro cuya intención es la de reconectar todas las partes del parque, limitar los linderos visuales, creando una mejor experiencia para los usuarios dentro del parque. Una de nuestras metas es la de conectar las franjas grandes del área, enriqueciendo la experiencia y creando una conectividad ecológica. Para hacer esto, se planea construir un sistema de puentes apropiado, creando continuidad entre las diversas áreas. De hecho, se planea remover algunas de las calles existentes y crear un sistema vial nuevo, el cual interfiera menos con la continuidad del parque. Otra gran meta es la de crear un área unificada donde se concentren las instalaciones o áreas deportivas, y también se está estudiando la posibilidad de paredes o arboladas para crear una barrera entre el parque y los medios viales y colonias adjuntas. Nuestra meta es la de optimizar y agrandar los pasillos ecológicos o senderos y conectarlos, creando un mejor medio ambiente para la fauna local y una experiencia más completa y diversa para el usuario al recorrer el parque. Otra meta es la de crear ecosistemas compatibles al área, los cuales puedan sobrevivir los ciclos climatológicos altamente variables de nuestra ciudad. Le cedo la palabra a Jeff Ayton. Gracias.
Good evening. I'll present two parts of the master plan here, ecological restoration and parking and transit. After I present ecological restoration, Odile will come back up and translate. So let's see if I can figure this out. No. So as Thomas spoke of earlier, we have here a proposed plant community restoration. The idea here is to create communities that will be resilient and will function through adaptive management practices that NPC and HPARD will take on to create these ecologies that will really sustain themselves through our tending and also through just natural succession. So here along, as Thomas mentioned, we have riparian forests along the bayou edge. Going up into the Broncos, those riparian forests come in as fingers, and then adjacent to those are the pine hardwood forests, and then beyond those, the savanna landscapes and the native prairies, both wet and dry. Am I going the wrong way? I am. It's a green button. Oh, so that was the wrong slide. And to start over again. We worked with both Berg Oliver and also with Advanced Ecology, a group here in Houston, two groups here in Houston, and this work primarily was the work of Berg Oliver, and they did over 300 plots throughout the park, looking at the various ecologies of the park. And what they found was that the dominant ecology here was savanna. There was pockets of forest and pockets of prairie, but predominantly what we see now is savanna. And that savanna and forest and prairie are made up of these types of plants. So in forests, we see about 100 to 150 trees per acre, 25% shrubs and 25% herbaceous. And then in savanna, we see about 50 trees per acre, 20% shrubs and 70% herbaceous, and then prairie, even less trees, about 5 to 10 per acre. And so if we go back to this earlier slide, you can see that a significant part of the park is very low tree count. So what was forest is now savanna. The goal of the restoration work, though, is to really push that savanna to the point where it really becomes a very significant part of the ecology of the park. This work is the work of Advanced Ecology, and they went into both OAR, which is the Old Archery Range, and into Hog Bird Sanctuary, and surveyed the canopy trees that were 6 inches in diameter and over. And they found not that many. Unfortunately, there are not a lot of overstory species that are native in both the Old Archery Range and in Hog Bird Sanctuary. So what we're seeing here is that we won't have a significant amount of native trees that will help repopulate both the mid-story and the understory. So we're looking at a situation here where there are significant invasive species both in the understory and in the mid-story, and if we do not do something about this, tend it, manage it, we'll see a predominance of invasive species starting to populate these spaces. So it's really important to begin to tend these landscapes. We sit here in Houston in the Gulf Coastal Plain. This is a very diverse area of the world and a very significant part of the ecosystem of Houston. I'm going to walk you through some typical sections here as we look at the various ecologies of the park. Down here, I'm not exactly sure which the button is. Here we are. The riparian zones that are adjacent to the Barranco. The intention here is, as I said, to repopulate this with a forest ecology and to provide access down here to these areas for people. There's an existing condition slide here, and then the proposed. So we will move, hopefully, from an existing condition of a somewhat compromised landscape to one that is more significantly populated by shrubs and canopy species that can hopefully one day create maybe a closed canopy over the bayou. So this is one of our typical sections. Maybe we could have the screens pulled back slightly, but the goal here is basically a restored landscape of native species. So we have swamp TT in here and American sycamore. We're working with the ecologists to really make sure that we're using really only native species in these areas to really push habitat for birds and other insects and Lepidoptera and stuff. So these, as we work our way inward from the bayou edge, as we move up in the terrain and up in elevation, we move from those riparian edges up into the barrancos. And this is this area here are those riparian edges and barranco edges, and a typical section through that where there would be access through a boardwalk that Thomas will get into a little bit later as he describes some of the plan work. Again, existing slide up here at the top, and a proposed condition at the bottom, a very dense vegetation of understory shrubs, mid-story trees, and canopy trees. So again, one of those sections showing ferns and oats and other grasses, and then mid-story trees. Whoops. Mid-story trees here of pawpaw and some box elder, and then moving up into the taller canopy trees of the oaks and the liquid ambar like the sweet gum. So again, as we move further up in the site, further up in elevation, we see some of those ecologies change from wetter to drier ecologies. This becomes the pine hardwood forest. Again, an existing condition up here to one of proposed. Lots of understory plants here and grasses and small shrubs in that underlayer, mid-story tree species, and then an upper canopy layer, which we're missing in many areas of the park. Again, that section, looking through this area, starting to see spatially what it would look like to repopulate this area with some of the native species, partridge berry and catalpa, hobblebush. And you can really start to see how the spatial characteristics of these landscapes change as we move from that bayou edge up into the Broncos and then up into these flatter areas of the park where we start to see the restored ecology of the pine hardwoods. And then we move into the restored pine hardwood savannas. Those are occupying the flatter, broader sections of the plateaus here between the barrancos. And this is a pretty significant landscape of the park now as we are proposing it and as we've talked with Berg Oliver and our ecotech panel about. So again, the existing condition, it's a pretty raw landscape right now. There's a fair number of invasive species that need to be taken out. There's actually a lot of deadwood in here from some of the work that Memorial Park Conservancy has done to manage some of those invasive species, and to a proposed landscape that's more full of grasses and shrubs in that understory, or that the understory layer, and then into the midstory and into clumps of canopy trees. So again, spatially, you can see how this section differs from some of the earlier sections, more open landscapes with grasses, tall pine trees, the sort of sentinel or historic pines that are left from when Memorial Park was really a very full forest. And some existing oak trees here that form those mottes of the savannas. And then in other areas too, the restored native prairie. There are remnant pieces of prairie that occur here along the easement for the railroad. In talking with the Houston Arboretum and Nature Center, there's a significant part of their master plan that will include prairie restoration work. We would like to see those tie together and really become a fairly significant piece of prairie restoration work. Again, that existing condition, this is the area along the Center Point easement, I believe to the north of the railroad, or to the north of Memorial Drive, to a proposed condition of native grasses with forbs, and then some sort of trees, lone trees out in that landscape. Again, you can see that the more open character here with existing oak trees and existing pines with the native prairies. These will become significant draws to insects and birds. Will become a very active ecological zone in the park. So restored wet prairie and savanna spaces is another ecology here. The existing conditions of some of those wet areas and proposed sectionally what that might look like. Thank you for opening that up. Get a full view of these wet areas. Water will sit for periodic moments, and Bree will talk about that a little bit in terms of the stormwater management of the park, but this water will perk fairly quickly and not become a problem in terms of mosquito larvae. And then just a sampling of some of the native plants that we're interested in using in the park. These will, of course, will be vetted with Berg Oliver and the ecotech panel and others, but this is just a sampling of some of those trees that we're looking at, some of the trees and shrubs that we're looking at in the park. I think Odile is going to do a translation.
Hi, everyone. I just want to quickly say that we see that there are some folks who are standing and sitting in the around the edges, and we just want to let you know there are seats available down front and a few places on this side, so feel free to come and get comfy in a seat. Thanks, Adil.
Jeff nos habló de la vegetación del parque, que la vegetación del parque ha cambiado de ser predominantemente un bosque a ser una sabana. Mientras que esto implica un cambio radical en los últimos 50 años, de hecho la Tierra se ha fortalecido y vuelto más resistente a las condiciones climatológicas, siendo más hospitalaria para diversos tipos de fauna. El nuevo diseño busca reconectar lo que es ahora un sinfín de retazos o corredores ecológicos. Los flujos de agua, la fauna y las comunidades vegetales serán restauradas. También se discutió el estudio conducido por Bert Oliver para asesorar la cantidad y calidad de los árboles y las especies invasivas del parque a distintos niveles y lo que se piensa hacer al respecto para crear y mantener un parque más sostenible de acuerdo a la vegetación y el clima local, la cual pueda sobrevivir las inclemencias del tiempo. Para esto se propone plantar plantas nativas y mantener las plantas invasivas al mínimo. Se hizo mención de varias áreas, de su condición existente y del plan de restauración de dichas áreas. Estas son corredor ribereño, barrancos y bordes ribereños, bosque de pinos y árboles no coníferos, sabana de pinos y árboles no coníferos, pradera o llanura nativa y pradera húmeda o sabana. Algunas áreas han sido afectadas por vegetación invasiva, como dije. Nuestra meta es la de limpiar y mantener estas áreas y plantar vegetación nativa, la cual se dé con más naturalidad. Otras áreas, como los barrancos, son frágiles y requieren más cuidados. Se propone construir pequeños puentes o pasarelas para que el público pueda disfrutar de dichas áreas sin que éstas se vean afectadas. Se habló de la cantidad y tipo de árboles en cada área y del porcentaje de arbustos y plantas herbáceas. La densidad de los árboles cambia del área boscosa de 100 a 150 árboles por acre, al borde de la sabana con un promedio de 50 árboles por acre y por último a la planicie o llanura con 5 a 10 árboles por acre. Los árboles sirven para amortiguar el ruido externo, tal como el continuo pasar de los coches. Les doy la palabra a Jeff.
Thank you, Odile. So I was asked to mention that someone from State Representative Sylvester Turner's office is here. So thank you for joining us tonight. Glad to have you here. So I'm going to talk briefly about parking and transit here before we move on to more exciting things, or maybe this excites all of you. But so we have done a study. We've been working with Walter P. Moore, engineers here in town. They've done a great job of really helping us assess the existing conditions of traffic around the park and in the park. And through that study and through our own design work, we really thought it was important to at least do some increase in parking within the park and then also disperse parking around the park. So to make sure that we were putting parking where there was use. So taking areas, like the area over here, where we will have the cycle track and loop, as Thomas will speak to later, and making sure that there's parking adjacent to that. Making sure that there's parking adjacent to new program, like the natatorium and the tennis center, and making sure that there's enough parking adjacent to the new sports complex. So we've been working with Walter P. Moore on really evaluating what we are showing here and what is existing. So this is an existing and proposed. We're proposing to increase parking by about 30%. The other way that we hope to deal with, or we hope that the City of Houston and the Parks Department is able to deal with some of the influx of new people and even people who currently use the park, is to really leverage the metro system within the City of Houston. And as you all, I'm sure know, there's a great plan that's out now that has reorganized Metro in the City of Houston, and it has created it into more of a north-south, east-west grid, and we're hoping that grid can really be used to access the park in more significant ways. And so currently this is showing bus routes that are 15-minute, 30-minute, and 60-minute bus routes that are either through the park or approximate to the park. And we are hoping to increase the porosity of the park and the ways of getting into the park by making sure that there's a connection that happens here at the traffic circle on Washington and Westcott that allows people to come into the park at this juncture. We also thought it was really important to add some bus stops within the park. So this is a spot here across Memorial Drive from another parking spot or another bus stop that would allow for access over the land bridge and allow someone coming eastbound to be able to take the bus back westbound. So adding bus stops was really important, adding connectivity here on the south side adjacent to the old archery range and to Uptown was really also a very important move. We also thought it was important to add B-cycle stations within the park. It made sense for people who wanted to ride Metro and come into the park to be able to say, oh, you know, maybe I'll grab a bike and tool around the park. That this made a lot of sense for people who are not riding their bikes. They're either in along Memorial Drive or hopefully up new connections here on the south side or even on the north side or even coming in from the west, from Uptown, that there would be opportunities within the park to ride a bike. This is the survey, I believe in, I'm going to get this date wrong, but I think it was 2012, that was done to evaluate the number of vehicles within the park. And you can see that Memorial Drive, fairly significant number of vehicles per day. And most of those vehicles come off and follow Woodway. Some of them go north on Memorial Drive and come up here into this northern area, and some of them peel off and are park users. This work is continuing because we don't have currently traffic counts for Washington and Westcott. That is something that Walter P. Moore is now evaluating, and they, as part of that evaluation, they will continue to do more traffic study. And one of the things to bring up in terms of the work that they've already done is that they have evaluated our proposed moving of roads. So here, as you saw earlier in the plan drawing, Memorial Drive, or the inner loop here will connect here at Memorial Drive and loop around and then re-enter Memorial Drive over here. Walter P. Moore had studied this intersection, and while there is minimal impact to the intersection here for traffic at the inner loop and Memorial Drive, there is no impact to the intersection here at Crestwood and Memorial Drive. And so that traffic study will be forthcoming and made public so that people can really review that and dig into it and take a look themselves. They have also done studies over here at where Memorial Drive passes underneath 610. And they have found that they're still studying the geometrics, as they say, of the road realignment here, but they think that it should work given the speeds of that road and the restrictions that are placed on it by the state. It increases the distance of travel there on that road by 0.2 miles, which basically is about 25 to 30 seconds if you're driving at the speed limit, which I know all of you don't, but some of you do. So this is, there's not significant change here either, although the study here is forthcoming. So in general, I want to preface this conversation about traffic and parking is that Walter P. Moore's studies are not finished. They will be finished before this vote goes to City Council, and so that document will be shared with City Council and will be made public so that people can review it. This is just a brief summary. It's probably a little too wonky for most people to really care or understand. But the general idea here is that there's still a green, which means that these intersections are under capacity. And what Walter P. Moore has studied is that there is an existing or a background grade, and then there's an adjusted existing. And this adjusted existing includes future use, peak use, and also includes the 30% more parking within the park. So these numbers are adjusted, and then they look at that as a proposed number. And you can see the grade doesn't change here, and we see AM and PM are significantly the same. So I think Odile is going to talk through parking and transit, and then Bree Sarté will be up.
En En esta sección se habló acerca de la propagación de las áreas de estacionamiento para mejorar el acceso a las distintas actividades que el parque tiene para ofrecerle al público. El estacionamiento junto a Memorial Loop Road será removido, permitiendo tráfico de doble sentido. La razón por la cual se está considerando remover el estacionamiento paralelo es estrictamente pensando en la seguridad del usuario. Las nuevas áreas de estacionamiento proveerán fácil acceso a todas las distintas áreas del parque e instalaciones y serán más seguras. El diseño que se ha propuesto aumentará la capacidad de estacionamiento por un 30%. Las autoridades de transporte público del condado de Harris están reconfigurando las rutas de camiones para crear una mejor red de transportación. Su meta es la de crear puntos de acceso más accesibles entre las distintas áreas de la ciudad. Muchas de las líneas aumentarán la frecuencia de rutas y el servicio de los fines de semana será tan frecuente como el de los días hábiles. Habrá variedad de lapsos entre las rutas. Estas serán de 15, 30 y 60 minutos, con recorridos y paradas nuevas junto al parque y de hecho a través del parque, haciendo el acceso a este mucho más fácil para los habitantes de la ciudad. El centro de tránsito para camiones se encontrará a 1 milla al noreste del parque. La meta es la de crear puntos céntricos en los cuales los estacionamientos, paradas de camiones y centros de renta para bicicletas estén concentrados o agrupados en un mismo lugar para permitir una fácil transición del transporte público al uso de las bicicletas para pasear por el parque. Se hizo un estudio por Walter P. Moore donde contaron el tráfico en el área, la cantidad de carros que transitan diariamente en el área y queremos hacer claro que las entradas al parque existentes permanecerán siendo las mismas. Solo se está estudiando la posibilidad de hacer cambios a algunas de las calles de acceso adentro del parque para facilitar el flujo del tráfico y estacionamiento. Muchas gracias. Bry.
Okay, hi, Bree Sarte with Sherwood Design Engineers. Great. Well, thank you all for coming, and here you are thinking that you're safe from the rain, and I'm going to talk to you about stormwater. Sorry about that. We're actually in a pretty incredible city, and I have the opportunity to work on great parks all over the world and have a wonderful team locally here. Tom and Steve, who are almost in the front row, who've been working closely with me on this. This is a place where water really is a part of the landscape, and where working with and living with the water is really an essential part of being in Houston. The fact of the matter that we get almost as much rain in any given year that would fill up this entire room to the level of this podium is notable and important, and it's also really informed the way that our scheme is unfolding and how we've been thinking about water resources and water management holistically in the park. We started by really looking overall at the park, and this may not be a way that you've seen Memorial Park before, but thinking about the systems of flow, and it's a place where, although the forest may have changed a lot, the water patterns are still very much as they've been for centuries. And one of the things that I thought was a rodeo joke when I first started working on the project are these two Broncos. I kept saying Bronco, are you sure, guys? Which are these significant drainage areas that come down through the west part of the park and through the east part of the park that really become and are the central framework of the park's drainage system. So that's been a really important clue for us to just think about how to work with the natural patterns of water that in many ways have been divided by the roads that have cut right through the middle of them, as you can see from this diagram. And I think from the very beginning of our work on this project has been a lot of talk about connectivity. I think for many Houstonians that's about transit, connection, biking, but it's also extended into this idea of taking care of water and connecting these water systems with the park's design in a way that's harmonious and additive. So we have looked at a whole network, and I don't expect you to understand my spaghetti diagrams, but what you see here are is a whole network in blue of a distributed system of water management that will take all of the stormwater as it hits, rather than ponding and creating mosquito breeding areas, is actually going to be designed to flow much more naturally back to the Broncos. And at the same time, present some opportunities for us to capture some of that water, which is already being done at the golf course, for more productive use and more reuse, to utilize less of the city's potable water, which is we're really excited about. So you'll hear us and have heard us talk a lot about low impact development, LID, LID, which are thoughtful ways of incorporating stormwater management into the park's design, thinking differently about the roads more as green streets, and thinking about the parking as being set in a really sensitive way into the site. So just as an example, on this diagram here is just a zoom in on one of the sites where you can start to see in blue this lattice work or network of integrated water management features that were characterized, and you'll see in a lot of the pictures and examples that are coming out through Nelson Birdwolt's work. And just thinking about this incredible challenge, right, that there's a series of droughts, the most recent of which created a tipping point, I think, in a way to think more holistically about this project. But there's still always a lot of water that falls during the year, and it doesn't necessarily pool or pond where you want it. These are a couple images from the park, and obviously makes it challenging living with that water. So what we've looked at is a way to think about all of that water, if we can store it in a series of logical places that can start to meet the need. The golf course is one of a top example of really thoughtful golf course management, great practices there, still uses a lot of water, almost 60 million gallons a year. The polo fields and the sports fields together use a little less than half of that, but there's a lot of water demand. That water demand will remain in some of the areas, and at least in the uses that are in yellow, but the way the plan's being organized will be reduced in some of the other parts of the site. And this last diagram just starts to show how we think there are some tremendous opportunities to build a network of storage facilities, enhancing the ponds that are in the golf course, numbers 1 and 2 here, and find several new sites where we could reduce the potable water demand from the city by at least 48%, or if we went all the way, we could offset all of the golf course water and some of the other water demands within these storage systems. And really important for us is finding ways to integrate this infrastructure so that it really becomes part of the beauty of the place, that it's really a part of the landscape story. And I'll turn it back over to Thomas to tell you more about that after Odile translates here. Thank you.
Sorry, I got your name. El ingeniero Brice Arte nos habló de una estrategia para reutilizar el agua pluvial, reduciendo así el uso de agua potable para irrigación. El plan consiste en retener el agua pluvial y usarla para la irrigación de algunas de las áreas del parque, tales como el campo de golf, campo de polo, alberca y canchas deportivas, y para uso de algunas de las instalaciones del parque. Esto sería algo fabuloso, pues hoy en día se usa agua potable para la irrigación de dichas áreas, utilizando millones de galones de agua al año. El agua pluvial se atraparía en cavidades o cuencas, se canalizaría y se acumularía en lagos artificiales o estanques. Esta agua se limpiaría, almacenaría y se usaría para irrigar las áreas antes mencionadas. Se está considerando la posibilidad de limpiar el agua que fluye del pavimento antes de que ésta llegue al río o a los estanques, removiendo sustancias contaminantes y sedimentos. Esto sería a través de un proceso natural. Dicho sistema utiliza senderos hechos de pequeñas piedras o de pasto que limpian el agua en su transcurso. Muchas gracias, Tomás.
All right, everyone. We are exactly on time, and the last segment of the presentation is the next 30 minutes, and I'd like to invite you to come on a walk with me through the park. I understand the technical information, the ecological information, the statistical information. It may be slightly tedious to sit through, but it's important that you see and fully understand the responsible process of the past year and a half that has led to these proposals. This is not careless work. This is not us rebranding your park. It is us as a large team listening carefully and hopefully responding appropriately. This is the full master plan drawing for Memorial Park, including the Hogberg Sanctuary to the right, and this fragment of the park to the left that was resulted as a fragment when 610 was built along this edge of the park, and I-10 was built along this edge of the park. This portion of the park was actually parkland that was traded out for development. It was in a land swap, so this used to be parkland that was developed into a neighborhood. Memorial Drive going through the middle of the park, and the Eureka rail line, just to get you oriented to the different areas. And of course, the bayou coming down along this edge, under 610, under the railroad, south of the park, and then down under Hogbird, passing Bayou Bend, and moving eastward into the Buffalo Bayou Park. Some of the major initiatives that it's good to see on this entire plan is one of the major moves is this 1,400-foot-long land bridge that crosses the 6 lanes of traffic of Memorial Drive, uniting the southern and northern halves of the park. Currently, Memorial swings up through the middle of this area and plugs in under 610 right here. We've allowed it to propose to let it hold close to Woodway and swing here close to 610, an area of the park with almost zero use, and come to this point and turn to go back into Memorial Drive. It also introduces a road that brings you to a parking lot, to new horseback riding trails, road biking trails, hiking trails, a connection under the river, under the road to the Arboretum and Nature Center. When I refer to the Memorial Groves, it's this area. One of the wonderful things along the rail line that has occurred over time through perhaps benign neglect or perhaps the maintenance regime under the power lines is that you have a very rich ecology of grassland habitat that is flourishing beneath the power lines, and we want to build on that healthy habitat, protect it, and augment it by introducing more and more of that grassland habitat. There's some wonderful drifts of native grasses up in these areas. Houston, I think, is an incredible leader in this legislation that recently passed allowing for recreational use in power easements. That is not allowed in many other parts of the country, and has been a phenomenal step forward in the greater connectivity of Memorial Park to the other parks within the region. You'll see the removal of Picnic Loop, the restoration of the entire southern half of the park as the healthy ecology that we've been discussing. You'll see all of the sports fields have been moved and rebuilt, higher quality, good drainage, good lighting, adjacent parking, shared concessions. It's a dramatic step forward for the athletic uses of the park. No ball field or sports facility is being removed from the park. We have exactly the same number of fields that we have today. They are just completely restored and moved to the northern end of the park. There also are no new drive entrances into or out of the park. We've maintained only the existing road network. You will see the quad of baseball fields, a fifth here, parking, softball, a soccer field, rugby field, additional parking, and then along the Memorial Groves, you're seeing the additional parking that Jeff walked you through, and these actually delineate the original barracks lines between the different regiments of Camp Logan. So in this way, it recalls the history, this historic Camp Logan area. You're seeing a new family play area with dedicated uses for small children, medium-sized children, and big children like us to use. Mountain biking in this quadrant of the park, this area of the park. You're seeing the multi-use trail swinging in this big graceful arc through the southern part of the park. And from that are pedestrian trails that move in and out of the barrancos. Whenever we cross a waterway, we're keeping you on a bridge, on a boardwalk, on a structure to avoid the easily erodible slopes. The bike lanes are being built, and you'll see some images, to be very exciting, tremendous flow, really exciting mountain bike trails that are so good that we hope that the mountain bike community will be self-policing and not go off into the other areas that are more fragile, that are really focused on habitat restoration. Here you're seeing an area of the park that is a nod to the Hare and Hare plan that was the plan commissioned for the master plan when Miss Ima Hogg was still alive, presumably under her blessing. Hare and Hare had done a master plan. Very little of it was built, mostly the golf course, and I'll walk you through that in detail. So we're going to walk essentially counterclockwise through the entire park. First, I'm going to start with the gateways. We wanted to have a family of initiatives that announced the entrance into Memorial Park, and in particular, tackled this difficult issue of the Weiss Tract, the piece of land below it, that's where the archery range was, the Houston Arboretum and Nature Center, and this corner of Memorial Park. No one realizes that at that intersection of 610, on all four sides of you, you're actually in Memorial Park. So we thought an entrance design would help with that. Similarly, on the east, a gateway to the east, Arnott, and then at the Washington Westcott entrance. So this is the first of many renderings I'm going to show you tonight that are part of the final deliverable package of the master plan. To orient you, you're looking at Uptown and the Post Oak neighborhood. You're looking straight south on 610. This is what was formerly the archery range. This is an elliptical wall that we're introducing that captures this fragment of prairie and the post oaks that comes all the way. So here is a walk into the Nature Center and the Arboretum. You're seeing this as the gateway into Memorial Park, the Weiss Tract, and the archery range. So we've tested this out a bunch, and it's pretty fun. When you're waiting at this stoplight, if you're in that yellow car, you look through and you can see the entire sweep of this wall and feel that you're in a space as a kind of major gateway into Memorial Park. Also visible from up here, just don't look if you're driving, for passengers to look out and see the giant ellipse. These are some concept sketches of the entrances from Woodway entrance, the West Memorial Drive at I-610, the idea of these long Texas limestone walls. We know there's not limestone beneath Houston, but stone gates to a park evoke something that makes me think of like the great national parks. There's something eternal. There's something about this threshold will be here forever. And the land swaps of allowing parkland to be developed for private communities should not happen anymore. And I think these kind of set a stake in the ground that say these are the gateways into this preserve, into this public land. This is a much more modest gateway at the smaller entrance at Arnott Street. So you see an inset panel of stone that says Memorial Park, a pedestrian gate. Again, these kind of very simple stone monuments that are the entry thresholds into the park. This is our next aerial. Here, you're at the eastern edge of the park. This is Memorial Drive coming into the park. These are the new gates. This is the Crestwood Crestwood Road. This is a reforested buffer to protect the views of the park users to not see the houses that flank the park. This is a pedestrian walkway that goes up over Memorial Drive, so that pedestrians can safely run on the outer loop trail, go up over Memorial and back down to the southern half of the park. This is the existing turn into the maintenance center with additional parking for cyclists and walkers to use the southern part of the trail. Straight across the street is the entry to the Park Loop Road. To the west of that, you're seeing groves of cars in shade trees that arc this way to the new swimming facility, tennis courts, and that's making its way up to the golf course. Beyond the parking, you are seeing saving all of the remaining and surviving trees, but improving the ground plane as a low meadow. This we're calling the Eastern Glade and Western Glade. This is a typology, an area of the park that doesn't really exist in Memorial Park, a place to go. It's a place of solitude, a place to read, and I'll show you images of that as we move along. You're also seeing the new stormwater management pond that the Western Glade overlooks through a cypress planting. Now I'll look at the new running trail center, a timing track that we're proposing, and the land bridge itself crossing Memorial Drive. I want to start each section with a precedent of things that we were looking at. So after this plan, I'll show you that. Here is the living bridge that for me it's a very important moment. It's the first time that Memorial Park had gone from decades of accepting interstates and highways and filling itself up with roads to saying, no, wait a minute, we need to start pushing the other way and let's start stitching back and forth. It's a narrow walk, it's a tremendous first step, but now we've taken that and amplified it dramatically. Memorial Drive stays in its exact configuration. It's not going down, it's not going up. The road stays exactly where it is. What we're proposing are to build these two tunnels over the existing road and backfill them with soil so that the forest ecology can come up onto the bridge and down the other side. So if you're on one of these trails, you can make your way up and over the 6 lanes of highway and perhaps not even know that you've crossed a major, not an interstate, but a major thoroughfare. We introduced this idea of an oculus that could be planted so that there's a bright well of light. You can always see to the end of the tunnel. These aren't very long, and it only takes seconds to go through them. But the benefits to the park user moving north and south are tremendous. This is the running trail center with a proposed expansion of 2 pavilions and a timing track, but we tailored this timing track to be like a Memorial Park timing track, not one that's at a high school or university campus. So the idea of it running through the trees that are limbed up, you can see through, is a new amenity. From this parking lot, you have the trailhead that can take you down to all the cycling tracks, so it's a convenient place to park for cyclists, a convenient place to park for runners, and then scattered all along the Seymour-Lieberman Trail are small parking lots. So we've really distributed that parking all the way around the trail. This is a page of precedents, a woodland running track, an elevated prairie that's making its way up. That might be what it looks like to cross the living bridge. And this is the land bridge. This is the precedent that engineers have come up with for wildlife crossings. And so that's what we took our cue from and have made it a much bigger one. So this is the rendering of, looks like fun, I hope. So the way we generated these renderings, we've worked with 2 different companies who've helped us with the renderings. Many of them are by Nelson Bird Waltz, our firm. We're just referring to them all as artist renderings. But we've tried, again, to be very thorough and careful. We got a, what's the gizmo called, a drone, and with our team flew the drone up to these positions. So these are renderings of our design built on top of actual photographs of the park. So the city is where it should be, the road is where it should be, it's actually this park. But then you can see coming under the railroad track, heading eastbound, under the living bridge, this exists, and then you go into the right-hand tunnel and continue to the second tunnel on your way down Memorial. This is the arc of meadow that comes up and over, and like I said, we can plant trees all the way up on these edges. So it's really the park victorious. It's the park that wins over the highway, and it says an amazing statement about Memorial Park taking back this important terrain. So you can see people gathering here in a hot air balloon taking off in our fantasy. You can also see the roof of the Running Trail Center and this proposed timing track. So this is real, this is not real yet. This is zooming in on that area. Here you're looking south. This is the existing parking area to the side of the Running Trail Center, the newly inaugurated Running Trail Center, the proposed pavilions for gathering and events, the timing track for the running community, the open understory so you can see through, but it provides shade and makes this really tailored to Memorial Park. Here in the distance, you're seeing the restored savanna and one of several lookout towers that allow people to climb up and look out over the park. Here you're seeing the meadow, the preserved meadow that I was talking about that's under the easements. We want to preserve the existing healthy native stands of grasses and enhance those moving north. You're looking south to Uptown. Now this segment we're calling the Bayou Wilds, and the park I'm going to walk you through is this multi-use trail. One of the things that we're proud of with this multi-use trail, and we've been back and forth about the width of trails and the material of trails, almost all the park trails will be crushed stone aggregate pervious surfaces. The one exception is this, one of the only exceptions, is this multi-use trail that will allow for the first time handicapped users of the park to deeply explore the southern half of the park. It will also allow emergency vehicles, fire suppression, or an ambulance. Should something horrible ever happen in the southern half of the park, for the first time we can easily get an ambulance back there. To build this one multi-use trail, and it's not open to traffic except in emergency. It's multi-use for shared use by walkers and cyclists. The rest of the trails throughout the whole southern half of the park are all natural surface trails. So this is a zoom in. You're seeing what we call the southern arc that allows an overlook. This doesn't go down the banks of the bayou. It stays high, so you have this prospect over the bayou. And this tremendous arc delineates this inner area of the Barrancos that have many, many hiking trails for meandering down, for bird watching. It's sort of from the decibel studies, it's the most quiet part of the park, so it's really that kind of wilderness sanctuary. One of the things we heard so many times early days was that this is our wilderness park, keep it a wilderness. And so that's what this entire southern half will give you, is that sense of wilderness. We highlighted those trails so that you can see them better. They won't be white. They'll be, like in the previous slide, a more natural sort of honey dust color. But this lets you see the different trails. You're seeing the bottom Memorial Drive, a new parking lot, the southern arc, and then all the pedestrian and cycling trails of the southern half of the park. This is a precedent showing that when you're in fragile areas or wet areas, we're putting you on boardwalk or bridges across those areas to protect them. And then this is a rendering. Let me orient you. You're looking westward. That's Uptown. There's the Williams Tower. This is the bayou making its way through the park. This is the eastern end of the Southern Arc Trail that takes you all the way through the savanna, wetlands, the barrancos, the forest, all the way to a lookout tower in the far west and to another overlook of the bayou. So this is this, we sort of internally call it the sanctuary. This is a rendering of what it might look like on the 4-foot wide running trails. You're seeing the larger trail back here, the multi-use trail, and this idea of a restored post-oak savanna. This is a rendering showing the stabilized mountain bike trails that are super elevated, again, making them very exciting in the hopes that it will encourage tremendous use of them, but not necessarily everywhere in the park. You know, we've had to balance so many desires, dreams, affections, and uses of this park, and we've tried to be measured in these responses, but give each place the best it can get for its use, and try to really balance that with so many different needs of the park. One of the things that we were concerned about is shared use is often dangerous, so high-speed cyclists and small children learning to ride or walking, or someone just wanting to be quiet and still in the park. Now we feel like Memorial Park, you know where to go, how to use the park, and there are different behaviors in different parts of the park. Ultimately, we think we're making a much safer experience for each user. This is the existing trail network. You're seeing the existing sort of multi-use trail, the Seymour Lieberman Trail, the Outer Loop Trail, the living bridge that exists, and there's the new running center. These are the proposed separated use trails. You're seeing the Seymour Lieberman Trail finally brought to 3 miles, thanks to the Eastern Glades. Within an inch, I promise, it will be 3 miles. You're seeing a tiny cycle track for little kids to learn. This is the kind of family play area I'm going to dig into next. You're seeing in the purple the mountain bike trails, pedestrian trails in green along the bayou and interior to the southern arc. You're seeing the multi-use trail that makes its way through the south, all the trails of the Houston Arboretum and Nature Center, a connection underneath the 610 highway to Uptown, a connection under the rail line to Uptown. And then this is a cycle track for high-speed use. It's how the picnic loop is currently being used. And so we've given them a new, by uniting this whole area, we have enough space to give a pretty spectacular cycle track. The brown are expanded horseback riding trails. And the new road of Memorial leads to a parking facility that allows access for people to bring their trailers and go horseback riding. This study was looking at all of these uses that had been sort of scattered in the southern half of the park, and with this idea to restore the ecology of the southern park, we realized that 79% of it was forest, was mixed ecologies, savanna, forest, prairie, and then the rest was all these different uses. So the new master plan takes that to 94% restoration of the ecologies of the southern portion of the park, with the family play area keeping only this northern piece of the picnic loop parking for the parking to the south, maintaining the maintenance area and the running trail center. The Bayou Wilds Trailhead, to orient you, you've just come out from under the living bridge. You go another 1,000 feet and you have a turn. This is a big park. The scale is pretty incredible. You come to this Bayou Wilds Trailhead. It's the trailhead for cyclists, for hiking, and a family play area. This is the zoom in of that. You turn into this treed parking lot for children to learn to ride. This is an area, number 8. Number 9 is picnicking and other children's play, small picnic groves, pump track for other kids, middle scale children to play. A lookout tower, number 11. You're seeing Memorial along the golf course and the land bridge adjacent. This is the trailhead, number 5, that takes you to the hiking trails and the mountain bike trails. And similarly, number 5 here to mountain bike and hiking trails. And this is the southern arc here with a bridge over the barranco or drainage way. These are some precedents. We think bright pink plastic equipment is not right for Memorial Park, that it should be play things that engage children in exciting ways but are made of natural materials. Maybe the lookout tower evokes the pine forests. And then this is an aerial looking south, the land bridge, the southern part of the golf course, Memorial Drive, the treed parking lot, bathroom pavilion, picnic area, the little cycle area, and that's the southern arc making its way all the way through the park, and the lookout tower. This is a rendering of the lookout tower looking out over the restored savanna. A rendering showing the children's playground and play area where the children can learn to ride bikes or rollerblade. The Bayou Breaks trails down in this area to the west. This again is the railroad line. Zooming in on that area, this is the southern arc making its way through the Barranco and staying level. Again, I was mentioning that it's wheelchair accessible, so you could get out onto a perch. So here it is at grade, coming down as the slopes are going to the fragile slopes are sloping down to the bayou. Here people playing in the river. You have this, that's an actual photograph of your bayou, by the way. Again, these are all drone pictures that we then stitched in the new design of the different areas. So this is the overlook at the end of that arcing trail. And there's a lookout tower in the distance. This was another important piece of the study, the incredible keystone that Memorial Park can serve as for the migratory birds going from the boreal forests of Canada all the way down into Central America. So you see these amazing diagrams coming through Houston. I'm going to go quickly through these. Anyone who came to the last presentation saw a snapshot of these, but what we're doing is looking at what wildlife communities and what horticultural communities go together, what will attract one another, and what are the strategies for restoring, again, as we move from the wetter areas to the drier areas. So you're moving up. This is the Southern Arc Trail section, and you can see the woodlands are very dense by the water, and they get thinner as we move up, just as Jeff explained in the ground plane restoration diagrams. This is a section through one of the deep drainage ways. You can see the elevated boardwalk keeping people out of those drainage ways, and really balancing wildlife restoration with recreation. Here we're getting to the upper drier areas as we move northward. You're getting into this savanna condition, thinner and thinner into the prairie condition. Now to the eastern glades. This is an area that I mentioned earlier where across from the current entrance to the existing entrance to maintenance, you'll be able to have one intersection. So we'll get rid of the second intersection here. One intersection that brings you up along the eastern boundary to the golf club. This is the eastern glades area. So this is the Hare and Hare master plan that we found this document in. I've mentioned before the interesting bridle paths and walks through native woods was the strategy for the southern and western portions of the park. And then this northeastern portion of the park's at approximate location of golf course, general play area, baseball, etc. And then it had this one garden. We were interested in this plan and its geometries, the era of Olmsted and the great parks movement of the United States. And we thought Houston had this, but it's lost. So this could become an area where, in a nod to that tradition, we could create a new amenity for the park that doesn't exist. We could expand Seymour Lieberman Trail to get to our full 3 miles. Jose, let's hear it for that. The park loop, the parking lots I described before, Seymour Lieberman Trail, and then the walk around the eastern glades. This line of trees is the original entry to Camp Logan. So carrying that line is something that as you come along the trail or you walk along here, you'll see this alley of trees that recalls the era of Camp Logan and the original entryway. This is not for cars. It will not be, it's a pedestrian entrance that recalls that. This is the entry for cars coming up this road. And this is that buffer that I mentioned that we were planting along the eastern edge of the park. So some renderings. This is a precedent one thing I need to mention. This is a new, in collaboration with Sherwood Design Engineering, a new stormwater management impoundment that supplies the irrigation, some for the golf course and some for the eastern glades, an overlook of Cypress, and a dock that looks out over the water. So this is a precedent for that water body and the quality of the eastern glades. This is something that doesn't really exist at Memorial Park, and I think will be a beautiful additional amenity. So here's the aerial of the eastern walkway over this is just for people, the East Loop Drive, the parking lots that I mentioned before, going up, and then there's that water body, the western glade and the eastern glade. It's important to mention in Jeff's presentation that any of the trees that are surviving in this area, we're going to obviously preserve the ones that are there, replant new healthy ones in addition to those. This is a view of what the quality of the glades might be from a bird's eye perspective. Walking around the perimeter of the glade, the idea of the grass on the interior and people making their way around these high trees. This northeast area, we're proposing a parking lot that you come to, then a natatorium, fitness center, and new tennis courts. The old tennis courts are here, and to accommodate other needs, we've moved them to the east side, and now we can, here you're seeing a full driving range and the new athletic fields to the north. This is the plan of that area, moving along the Eastern Loop Road into a treed parking lot. This green box, number 4, is an enclosed swimming pool. Noise is a big issue for the neighborhood. Also, children being able to learn to swim year-round was a big issue we heard, so those two things went great together. We do an enclosed swimming pool. There's no sound or noise. The building itself is a buffer between the parking and the neighborhood, and then we continue our forested buffer all along this edge of the park. Currently, there's a field here, so that's been moved out. This is an image of what a natatorium might look like, a completely enclosed building that could function year-round. The sports complex to the north, this is the plan. Here we're continuing along the East Road, an expanded parking at the golf course. We have the baseball field here, softball, 4 softball fields, a 5th softball field, new stormwater pond, new parking, new parking, new parking. 13 is the rugby pitch. This is a turf field so that it can have year-round play on a soccer field right here. The volleyball, croquet, and the driving range in this area. Each of these ponds is proposed to be expanded to continue to offset the water demands of the park, to not use drinking water, but to use stormwater. So this aerial, this is exciting for me to see. You're seeing the turf field in the foreground, softball field, treed parking, I-10. You're looking eastward toward downtown, the quad of softball fields with shared concessions in the center, stormwater pond, the shaded area for the driving range, a reforested area along the SLT, making its way through, and then a reforested perimeter edge to the park. The Memorial Groves, this is an idea about recalling the sacrifice of the Houstonians who were trained for war here in Memorial Park at Camp Logan. What we're proposing is to preserve any of the existing healthy trees that are in this area, to re-demarcate the boundaries between each of the original regiments. We know exactly where these division lines were between the regiments, and then to plant pines on a perfect grid to recall the sacrifice of each of the soldiers who died that were trained in this park. So this will reinforce the idea of Memorial Park as a memorial. It will remind Houstonians of the sacrifice of other Houstonians in service to our collective freedom. And this is our source of inspiration, these Texas pine plantings. This is an archaeological remain within the park of some of the outbuildings and latrines of the original Camp Logan, and then what our proposed picnic areas would look like within the Camp Logan Memorial Groves. This is the rendering of that area. You're seeing one of the parking areas, a shelter, the restored and protected grassland beneath the power line easement, the grid planting of the pines in these rows to recall the soldiers that were trained here. And you're seeing each delineation. There are different pockets within these groves for large-scale picnicking, for gathering. This is where we really expect people to come to find their special place to do picnicking. It can be from 2 people to 200 in this area. This is a rendering of the quality of being inside those groves and the amazing light that you can get, interpreting the ruins that are within the park, explaining those to people, and telling the story also of the revolt that happened at Camp Logan. There are some painful parts of history that I think we still need to think about and tell those stories. I believe that the landscape can be a remarkable bearer of stories and meaning. I like toggling between these two. This is an old postcard of Camp Logan and one of the streets through the park. So these, it recalls the structure of the park within the campsites. The last area of the park is the northwest quadrant. Thanks to the shift of Memorial Drive to the perimeter, we have 400 parking spaces. We have a cycling track. Here are the parking spaces, picnic areas near the parking lots that look into the woodland. This heavier line is the cycling track. It's a hard surface cycling track for the echelon cycling that's happening now around Picnic Loop. This is a separated grade crossing for horses to make their way through the park. So these are horse trails, interior but separated from the cycling trail. Those are 2 things that are kind of dangerous, and so having them in the same quadrant but separated, particularly a quadrant where very few people go or use, it's like we've discovered another 300 acres of the park. This is a typical grade separated crossing in Central Park. That's our inspiration for the cyclists to go over, the horses to go under, horseback riding on natural trail, natural materials, and cycling on asphalt pavement. Again, by separating these uses, we're looking for the safest possible and most exciting visitor experience. So this is a rendering of what that might look like on that loop trail. This area to the west, that's to the west of 610, the idea here is similarly to insert a trail network that stitches right to the neighborhoods to the south and west. A parking lot. This is the water access point that was constructed before we started working on the project. But you could park here and take your canoe or kayak down to this access point and float the bayou. This is some of the ideas of the trails moving through there, a lookout tower, and the access point. Perhaps this could even become a center for boat building and education about water ecology, water safety. And then the hog bird sanctuary, some interesting things happening here. The existing parking lot, we're looking at 2 trails for bird watching, restoring the ecology of this to really be focused on attracting birds. And then number 6 is the Garden Club of Houston project, where they're doing a demonstration of this restoration work that we're looking to do across the rest of the park. On our Ecotech panel is a scientist named Sin-T Lee from Rice University, and Sin-T Lee is working with the Garden Club of Houston to do this demonstration project that is really an exciting first step in the restoration of the park. This is the collaboration between Rice and the Garden Club of Houston. And this is a rendering that our office did of what it might look like to walk through the Hogbird Sanctuary, a very different experience than today, where it's quite difficult to move through with the privet and Chinese tallow. So this is the full master plan, and I'll end back with this slide of really a vision of making a framework and an ecology that will be resilient, not just today and in the near term, but also for the next century. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
He's awesome. Ok. Uno de los puntos más importantes que cabe recalcar es el hecho de que el nuevo plan maestro se basa en facilitar el uso y el acceso al parque para el usuario. Esto se logrará por medio de puentes naturales, senderos asignados para usos específicos, los cuales darán más seguridad a los usuarios, y por la concentración de los campos deportivos e instalaciones en una misma área. Se planea que los senderos sean de fácil acceso al público inmediatamente al entrar al parque. Esta es una de nuestras metas principales. También es importante recalcar que las entradas o rutas de acceso al parque vía automovilística permanecerán siendo las mismas. Se planea en un futuro embellecer estas entradas por medio de vegetación, paredes o puentes, y así marcarlas o definirlas mejor para hacer claro que se está entrando al parque. Algunas de las calles de acceso dentro del parque serán modificadas para mejorar el flujo del tráfico, mejorando también el sistema actual de estacionamiento. Otra meta es de crear un medio ambiente que nos permita establecer un verdadero contacto con la naturaleza y a la vez limitar el impacto que estos senderos, pistas o instalaciones puedan tener en el parque. Por medio de pasarelas, el usuario podrá sentirse dentro de la naturaleza y recorrer nuevos senderos sin que estos impacten la vegetación natural del parque. Inclusive se planea construir un mirador. Se creará un parque infantil tratando de hacerlo lo más afín a la naturaleza posible, y se está estudiando la posibilidad de una torre de observación y muros de escalada. También se han sugerido algunos programas educativos, tales como el programa juvenil para construir pequeñas lanchas. Al final de cuentas, habrá un ligero aumento de la cantidad de senderos de acceso al público, pero el uso de cada uno será mucho más definido, haciéndolos más seguros. Por lo general, los senderos serán formados de piedra triturada. Habrá unos cuantos de superficie dura. La señalización es un punto importante de este proyecto, pues facilitará el uso del parque al público. Es importante que el usuario lea y siga las reglas decretadas en los letreros. Al final de la presentación tuvimos la oportunidad de ver cómo lucirá el parque una vez que este proyecto se haya terminado. Se presentaron diapositivas donde pudimos apreciar todas las innovaciones una por una, incluyendo el centro Blossom & Arnold, originalmente planeado por la compañía Hair & Hair, un espacio de uso múltiple, y el mejoramiento del campamento Logan, que se encuentra dentro del parque para conmemorar a los soldados de la Primera Guerra Mundial. Se planea plantar una serie de árboles altos en su honor. Pudimos apreciar la ubicación de nuevos estacionamientos, campos deportivos, gimnasio, canchas de tenis, arboladas, puentes y senderos. Se habló acerca del santuario de pájaros Hog. El objetivo es el de restaurarlo al remover plantas invasivas exóticas y poner en su lugar plantas nativas apropiadas para crear un medio ambiente más saludable para los pájaros y para la fauna local. Damos gracias a expertos locales, al Club de Jardinería de Houston y a la Universidad de Rice por su aportación. Memorial Park es un parque de todos y para todos. Es el tesoro de nuestra ciudad y está en el corazón de nuestros ciudadanos. Por eso la importancia de su mejoramiento y mantenimiento. Cabe mencionar que el equipo de Nelson Bird Walsh toma muy en serio el trabajo que se le ha encomendado de restaurar nuestro parque. Gracias por un magnífico trabajo. Gracias a ellos. Por último, quiero agradecer la oportunidad que se me ha brindado de representar a la comunidad hispana en este proyecto tan importante mediante la traducción de estas juntas públicas. Me siento muy honrada. Por último, quiero agradecerles a todos su asistencia en nombre de todos nosotros. Gracias por acompañarnos a crear un mejor parque para todos. Y recuerden que quedan cordialmente invitados a hacer uso del Memorial Park, que es un parque de todos y para todos. Gracias.
Thank you, Odile. So everyone, we are going to do our Q&A session now. We do want to still get you out of here at 8:30 or as close to the time we promised as possible. So we are going to do as many questions as we can in the next few minutes. But don't worry, we will be posting the questions, all the questions we've received tonight, along with their answers, on the website, memorialparktomorrow.org, along with all of the other questions we received throughout these public meetings and their answers. So thank you, planning team, for joining me up here. So the first question could be for Thomas or Sarah, so you can decide how you want to address it. The question is, how will the changes affect major Houston events that ceremoniously traverse the park, such as the Houston Marathon and the Rodeo Parade?
We have met a number of times with the Houston Rodeo, and it's been terrific understanding this amazing event, and my design team and I are going tomorrow night, and we're really excited to go and see the rodeo. And I have belt buckle, I'm all set. On my 20th visit to Houston, actually, a gentleman from Uptown, he said, on your 20th visit, you need boots. You gotta have the right boots. And I'm not wearing them today because I'm on a long trip and they're big. But the rodeo is a very important institution. It's one of those cultural traditions that we seek to preserve within the park. We carefully looked at their camping needs when they come into Memorial Park. We figured out how much square footage that is. We then looked to that northwest quadrant that I showed you where the cycling track is, the paved surface. So that plus the parking lot can completely accommodate the trail ride within Memorial Park. So it's a much better facility. There'll be bathrooms. There is ample parking. And we actually tailored that for both uses so that, I'm sorry for 3 days a year for the cyclists, well, and I'd say give it a day after for a little bit of cleanup, but for the cycling community of which I'm a member and the equestrian community which I'm a member too, it was a great combined use. So it's exactly the amount of, or ample for what the rodeo needs. Similarly for the marathon, we think these are those memorable cultural events that connect people to their park. So they have been taken into consideration.
Great. I'll ask the next question of Joe. The question is, Houston is a city with one of the lowest amount of parkland per capita in the country. Why doesn't the city and the TERS take the $150 million and buy more parkland instead of spending it on Memorial Park?
I think the first and the easiest answer is the $150 million, if that's the number, it has to be in the confines of that TERS, and so because of that spending restriction, that money has to be spent there. I will say percentages are one thing. Let me just tell you the number we work off of. We work off, our goal in this city is to put a park every half mile or 10-minute walk. So we don't work with an acreage number. We work with those demands of how to turn this city green. In those areas where we have development and we have development dollars to spend, then those dollars we say we need to be buying parkland. We work with Trust for Public Land to designate those areas for us. In those areas of town where we do not have that development, you can be assured we will be pushing as a department that that's where our bond dollars will be going to make land acquisitions for future users in this city.
Thank you. So the next question I'll ask of Jeff, as with any of these questions, if I direct a question, oh wait, where's Jeff? Hi, Jeff. Okay. Well, I'll ask it of Thomas then. Your map shows a vast arc beginning and ending at the bayou and cutting far north into now forested area. Is this to be the boardwalk? Why? How is this preserving anything?
Every trail is not necessarily a mission of preservation. I think we're meeting many needs, which is accessibility within the southern half of the park. That trail allows people to have a prospect over the river, which is something that so many people wanted to see the bayou, overlook the bayou. It allows at each end of that arcing walk, which is on grade everywhere except when it crosses a drainage way, a water body, or at the very ends when it's overlooking the river. It's just a trail like Seymour Lieberman Trail on the ground. It's on the ground, the earth. It's not all built up. But I think it's provided a lot of accessibility into the southern half of the park. It's also useful as an orientation device. For those of you who have hiked a lot in the southern portion, it can be quite disorienting because the drainage ways are moving in every direction, so you're not always sure what's up and down. And I think coming upon that trail will let you know, it'll orient you as to where you are within the park.
Thank you. The next question might also be for you, Thomas. Is this restoration moving in conjunction with the Houston Arboretum's renovation and restoration of their land? Will the spaces be unified and continuous?
The Houston Arboretum and Nature Center is a very important part of Memorial Park. We see it as something within the park itself. They have been phenomenal partners through this master planning process. We met with Debbie Markey our first week on the job, and she was so warm and welcoming to us and shared with us all the research and information that Design Workshop and Reed Hildebrand had done working on their master plan. They were about a year ahead of us starting out. That work was, and those both, the owner of one of those firms was my teacher, and so our firms really come from a similar place of preserving ecologies, education, and recreation all combined in a balanced way. So yes, they've been fantastic partners. We've been very collaborative back and forth, and as you will have seen on some of the plans that Jeff Ayton walked you through, the prairie restoration in Memorial Park east of the Arboretum and Nature Center will actually flow into the Arboretum and Nature Center, or vice versa. Their restoration will come our way. They may get there first. But it should, it's a different institution with a different mission, but these things really belong together. And I think our missions are so complicit that in a way, I like to think of the Houston Arboretum and Nature Center, and forgive me if I get this wrong for those of you involved in it. It's an organization I admire a lot, but I think of it as kind of the classroom that teaches you about the wildlife, the plants, the ecology, that then all of Memorial Park is the laboratory to go explore on your own. So it's kind of the classroom where you go and then you learn all these great lessons and how to be a good steward, and then you can go and demonstrate that in Memorial Park.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. This question I'm going to ask of Sarah. Does Uptown have a transit plan to link to the park?
Well, I would say transit does link to the park already. The reimagining plan, which will increase the frequency in which buses currently travel on certain routes, I think will help get people to the park near term. I suspect the question is maybe more specific to the proposed new dedicated bus lanes on Post Oak Boulevard, and certainly a goal is to get people to the park and to have that happen more easily through transit. If the lanes are constructed as planned, they do become elevated north of Post Oak into up and into 610. So how that exactly happens would have to be worked through, but there's certainly a desire to make that possible.
Thank you. The next question, I think maybe for Joe. Is Houston going forward with the trails by the power right-of-ways? How would that affect the plan, if at all?
The answer to that one is we do have a grant out right now to build a bridge. That trail piece would be connected into the master plan process that Thomas and them have designed for us. We would, once we bridge, if we get the grant, that's the big if, that would build the bridge piece, and then we would work through the master plan that's already been assembled, how to connect those trails to bring us up to the run-in center.
Thank you. So we are getting very close to 8:30, so I'm going to ask one more question so that we are able to wrap up. But again, we are going to post all of the questions and answers online. I think this is another Sarah question. The question is, when does this transformation begin?
Well, the first step is, as Joe and Councilmember Cohen said, is we need to go through the city process and have the park approved and adopted. But assuming that that happens, the TERS is certainly going to play a funding role in the project, and our 5-year CIP puts us in a position really to begin that work as early as this fall. So let's all come out and support the plan and hope that we can move forward and make this vision happen. Joe, excuse me.
And then I need to add to that, though, the Memorial Park Conservancy will also be kicking off a capital campaign at some point here to pick up some of those pieces that need to be added into it so as we can build this plan moving forward. This plan is a huge plan. I keep saying it's a plan, it's a plan, it's a plan. Once a plan is approved, then a funding system has to be put in place to move it forward. It's no different than the 20-year plan that we did at Memorial Park. I'm sorry, Herman Park, thank you. Herman Park, and that process as it evolved over those 20 years moving it forward. We'll have the same piece here, but we're looking forward. We're very appreciative of the TERS with some funding down the road, and also Memorial Park Conservancy to help us implement this plan down the road.
Thank you. And actually, that is a great segue to the next piece, which, Joe, I'll ask if you could just help to close this out with, this isn't working, but with the, here we go, what are the next steps, immediate next steps from here?
Sure, the next step will be, well, as we said earlier, we will move this plan forward to the Quality of Life meeting. It'll be March 25th. Is it up there? Nope, it's not up there. Okay. March 25th, 2 p.m., a short version, as Councilman Cohen said, a short version will be presented. That's okay. Will be presented to the Quality of Life Committee. It is a public meeting for comments in those periods. Once that part moves over, we will then move forward to try to move it to City Council for approval as an actual approved master plan for the park. You can read the rest of that up there. I would just like to tell you, from a Parks Director, this is another important process in the greening of this city and how we take care of our parks and move forward. I have said, as today, I was the guy who said, do we cancel the meeting today because of the rain? I was outvoted, as you see. Thank you for every one of y'all coming. But I've also said, too, I will never complain ever, ever about rain again because of 2011. Rain is good no matter how much we get. We may not like it, but this process is very important to all of us. Send your comments in, keep them coming in as we progress and move forward. To the team, thank you, thank you, thank you to each one of you showing up today. Thank you. I think Shelley's going to end it, and then thank you for coming.
Para todos que vinieron, para los que hablan español, muchísimas gracias por venir, por compartir este proyecto con nosotros. Es muy importante para el futuro del parque y para el futuro de Houston. Muchas gracias y buenas noches.